What's going on, y'all? I hope y'all enjoyed my last video talking about a buyer's market. And man, do I have a really interesting video for y'all today. I'm going to be doing a review of this gentleman's new theory that he just coined called the Great Melt-Up. And it's a fascinating theory, and I think he did a great job explaining why he thinks that's going to happen. And it also really does a good job of reiterating all of the points I was making on my past video about being in a buyer's market and my recommendations to buy real estate assets while in the market that we're in right now. So again, my name is Mr. Steele. I am a local real estate agent here in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. This is not legal advice or financial advice. I am merely a lowly, humble realtor trying to make my way through the world and give you the best information possible and maybe help you make a little extra money. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and I'm going to do a review and have y'all follow along with me. All right.
The story about inflation, how it reaccelerates hard. So you know how we had the Great Recession? Well, I'll coin this event the Great Melt-Up, and it will happen. It is inevitable. So this story, it starts with the US government's, so the US federal government's national debt crisis. It's going to get worse. It's going to get exponentially worse.
So basically, he's just going to go through and he's going to explain, basically, we've been taking on a whole bunch of debt, lots of debt, so much debt, insane amounts of debt. Let's go and skip ahead. Here's our national debt, just kind of going over why we have so much debt.
This is where we're currently at. Again, this is from the US Treasury's website. The federal government is in $35 trillion in debt. The interest payments on this debt is, of course, a big concern. As the government accumulates more debt, the interest payments grows. So the government has to make interest payments to whoever they borrowed money from, whoever they owe money to. So that could be.
And that's a big number, guys. The amount of interest we're paying at an annual basis is insane.
Other countries. We're talking about Japan, China, the UK,
yeah, we have to pay a lot of people money.
It could be the individuals, whoever has a US government bond. Now, I want to connect the dots for you. Why this is a crisis, why inflation will get worse, why the US government, why the US economy cannot afford a recession, and also why the government will choose hyperinflation rather than deflation. So I want everybody to know this so that they can be best prepared. The federal government's primary source of income is tax revenue, so just taxes. So the biggest income source is individual income taxes, then Social Security, Medicare taxes, followed.
Not super important, yeah. We have a limited amount of ways to generate income and revenue as a country.
So for fiscal year 2024, the US government has collected about $4.4 trillion. So that's essentially the government's income.
Sounds like a lot of money.
So they're going to end the fiscal year around $5 trillion. But this is where we're at right now for the year, the fiscal year. Now, here's how much the government has spent.
So that's a problem. As you can see, we're making $4 trillion something dollars a year, and we're spending, right now, it looks like $6.2 trillion a year. So we're spending way more money than we're making as a country. That's an issue. You don't have to be a genius, you know. I mean, everyone's got a household budget or a business, and if you're spending more money than you make, the music's eventually going to stop, guys. Eventually, it's going to be a problem.
So far, this fiscal year, $6.3 trillion. So the government has overspent by $1.9 trillion, and they need to borrow the difference. Now, here's what the money is being spent on. So this is coming from the same website, the US Treasury. The top expense items are Social Security payments, then Medicare, then interest payments.
Look at the interest payments that I mentioned earlier. It's the third most expensive cost we have as a country. We're spending more on interest than our national debt.
Then healthcare, national defense, income security, veterans benefits, education, etc. Now, I want you to take a real good look at this. The government is overspending by about $2 trillion currently, right? So where are we going to cut?
I think I said national debt. I meant national defense.
$2 trillion from. Take a good look. Who's going to get screwed over here? Now, this is also coming from the Treasury's website. So this is another problem. It says that as of August 2024, the government will spend over $1 trillion.
It's hilarious, since this is probably a government page that instead of saying a trillion, they put 1,049 billion to kind of make it seem, I guess, more manageable. I don't know.
Year on interest payments over the next 12 months. So that's the current run rates. So the interest payments are accelerating. That means that there's going to be less money for other programs. So listen, this is one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve had to cut interest rates. Just think about it. For the full year, if the government's going to collect $5 trillion in income from taxes, right? So $5 trillion, and they're going to spend $1 trillion on interest payments. That's 20% of tax collections. So what's going to happen when that gets increased to 30%, 50%, 100%? It's just going to be, and this is unsustainable. It's just getting worse. This is ridiculous. It's like a house of cards.
Yeah, and I don't think he mentions this, but basically, as they raise interest rates to fight inflation, the amount of money that we have to spend as a country on our interest rates, on the debt we owe, those payments go up too to reflect the new interest rate, the higher interest rate. So, yeah.
So it's eventually going to collapse. However, by lowering interest rates, it just buys more time. It's a stalling technique.
It decreases the interest payments that we have to make, and it buys us time.
Now, some people are going to say that the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve, they can just print the money, right? And I'll say that you are absolutely correct. Yes, they can. However, if they...
Which causes inflation.
They do that, if they print trillions of more dollars, you know what's going to happen. You know the consequences. That's going to skyrocket inflation. Now, I want you to look at the trajectory that we're on. The red line is...
I'm going to skip through some of this, but basically this is just a future trajectory of our spending versus our income. And as you can see, the expectations per this chart are we're going to continue spending even more and more money, and we're going to make substantially less more money, and the gap between how much we're spending and how much we're making as a country is going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
The government will continue to overspend. That's not surprising.
That's the gist.
And guess what? Last week, the government passed their CR, the government funding bill. There were no spending cuts.
Oh God, yeah, it's like every year they just raise the ceiling for the budget every year. It's like, oh God, the government's gonna shut down. We're not gonna have enough money to pay employees. What do we do? And they all just vote at 3 a.m. in the morning and raise the budget ceiling. It's crazy.
Same old, same old. So listen, the situation's just gonna get worse. That is a given. And it doesn't matter who wins office, Trump or Harris, makes no difference. Trump is...
This is where I disagree a little bit.
Going to overspend like crazy. Trump added a record amount of national debts, more than Obama. True. And look at the Biden-Harris combo. They're going to do the same thing. More. They're going to spend like crazy. They added a record amount of national debts, more than Trump.
Yep.
So the national debts, it doesn't matter who wins. It's going to increase, and the interest...
So I technically do agree with this, but I think there is more to this decision-making between the Trump and Harris, because although I think you're looking at a lot of spending on both sides, Harris is going to spend a lot of money, Trump is going to spend a lot of money. One, I would probably point out that Trump will, I think, make better decisions on how to spend that money since he's a businessman. And I also think he's going to make policies that are going to grow the economy and grow job opportunities. And so what we're going to do is we're going to increase tax revenue. We're going to have tariffs. So we're going to generate more money. So although, yes, I think he will spend a lot of money, which will lead to inflation, absolutely, I do think he is the better option because he's going to still grow the country as a whole, domestic jobs, job growth, etc., which will drive revenue for the country. And so even though we're going to spend more money, we will also make more money under Trump, in my opinion. I just think he's a more business-friendly president. We don't have to get into politics or, his rhetoric or anything like that, but just in general, as a non-emotional decision on business, he's gonna be a better decision business-wise for the country. But I do agree he will spend a lot of money. There's no option that doesn't spend a lot of money.
Payments will increase as well. Okay, now just think about this. Let's run this scenario where the federal government learns how to balance their budget. They cut spending. And okay, this is a joke, this is never gonna happen, but just think about it.
Oh, and that reminds me about him and Elon's relationship, where it sounds like Elon may get involved and be a part of a cabinet or an administration where he is going to be a part of cutting things and, looking for excess and, organizations and three-letter, departments that basically are just bloatware that we can get rid of as a country. That is just a waste of money and a waste of expenses that aren't really doing anything or serving us as the citizens and people of the country. So you may actually see some reasonable amount of budget cutting. You can't cut too much, as he's going to get in a little bit, but you may see a little bit of trimming the fat in the Trump administration as well, which I also think is a good thing.
If they cut spending, if they balance their budget, what would happen? The U.S. economy would be thrown into a deep recession. You have to remember the U.S. government, the federal government, is the largest U.S. employer. So what are they supposed to do? Massive layoffs and cut benefits all across the board? But listen, I really want you to think about that, because the U.S. cannot afford that. They cannot afford to have a deep recession or high unemployment. You know why? If there's a deep recession or high unemployment, then tax collections go down. And then that's going to leave us in the same position, a big deficit, and then the government would have to borrow more money. The debt will keep going up, and the interest payments keep going up. So listen, in a deflationary environment, your pre-existing debts become more expensive to service. So it's just going to make the situation worse. So listen, I'm basically saying that the U.S. government really put everyone in a bad spot, a very difficult spot. That's the truth. They left us with no good options.
Basically, he just goes through and, hey, if you rob a bank, what are your options? You don't have any good options. So we don't have any good options is all he's saying right here.
In that position, what are your options? Do you have any? And surround the bank. In that position, what are your options? Do you have any good options? No, they're all going to be bad options.
Yeah.
So those are the consequences to making a bad decision. I would say making a bad decision repeatedly. Now, I do want to tell you this because there's an idea. There's a concept that's circulating that
I'm going to skip through this, but basically he's talking about AI or, big technological leaps potentially being our saving grace. And so AI coming in and balancing the budget in a way that doesn't crash the economy or driving up production so much that we're able to kind of, get through all of this. So let me skip a little bit.
So the best bad option that we have right now is to inflate. And that's going to be the favored route because two reasons. So the first reason is because inflation makes it easier to keep up with the interest payments. And two, inflation gives the elite class an advantage. The advantage is first access to money. Okay, so.
Yeah, so this is where he gets into it just a little bit. I wish he'd maybe touched on a little bit more, but this is where buying real estate or assets is going to be a big win if inflation happens. I mean, we're already having inflation, but if we experience hyperinflation, and again, we're printing money like it's going out of style, and it seems to be that this guy's probably on the right path, and we could definitely experience hyperinflation. If that does happen, you do not want to be someone, a regular Joe, with $5, $10, $50, $100,000, $200,000 in the bank, because your buying power is going to be crushed, because your money's value is going to go down and the cost of everything is going to go up. You want to take that money and invest it in assets that will go up with inflation, that inflation is going to bring up. So as the cost of goods and services and the cost of living goes up, the things you own that have equity in them will go up too, whether it's stocks, whether it's real estate, gold, you name it.
What's the lesson here? The lesson is that you must invest in financial assets. This is not to get rich. This is for your protection. This is just to keep up with inflation. So I'm telling you, inflation is going to reaccelerate hard. Probably 2026, could be sooner. But that's going to be the start of the great melt-up. So more and more people are going to realize this. And I'm telling you, you have to get ahead of this. Now, for the average person, I'll give you some straightforward examples. One example would be buying a home as your primary residence.
I think that's
so there's all this talk about there, is it better to buy or rent? I would say that if you're going to live in a home for 3 years or more, you're going to be much better off buying because just think about it. If you're going to get a mortgage and inflation is running at 10%, 15%, then it's going to be so much easier to pay off the mortgage. If you're renting, and the landlords, if we're in that type of environment, what are they going to do? They're going to jack up the rents 15, 20, 25% a year, and you're going to be at their mercy. For the average person, It's about getting invested in the stock market. Just ride the wave up.
This is where I diverge a little bit from him. I think he's giving relatively good advice, but for the average person, I don't think stocks are the best option. I think the first option, a home, is the best option. And again, not financial advice, but my 2 cents are is the stock market's a little more complicated to get in. A lot of the methods of getting into the stock market and investing in stocks are oftentimes like more like retirement accounts, things that are going to penalize you for touching those investments. If the stocks go up in value and you want to liquidate them, you're going to take heavy penalties. Even if you don't go with one of the old school, Roth IRAs or 401ks and you get penalized, you're still going to pay a lot of taxes on the growth of those stocks when you want to liquidate it. And chances are, if we get into hyperinflation and all of your stuff goes up, you're going to want to get some of that money out so you can live comfortably to offset this new cost of living. And me personally, I'm more familiar with real estate, and I personally think real estate as a first-time home buyer or someone buying a house is going to be the better method in transportation because you have a lot more favorable ways of liquidating that asset. For example, if you're a first-time home buyer and you buy your first home, you can homestead it. Okay, this will reduce your property taxes on an annual basis, and if you liquidate it, you have all of these awesome benefits where you don't have to pay taxes on your proceeds up to a certain point. And again, not financial advice, but it's all, you can Google it. So if you're single, you're good up to $250,000 where you don't have to pay taxes. If you're married, you're good up to $500,000 where you don't have to pay taxes. So you can liquidate these houses after the inflation hits and you're sitting really pretty and you have all this equity. And now it's like, okay, great. Well, you just don't want to see numbers on a screen. My home's worth this, and I only paid this, and there's all this money. Yeah, well, you probably are going to want to touch some of that money because everything's really expensive. Maybe you lost your job. Like, you need to be able to access this money in an advantageous way. Real estate gives you that ability to do so because it is going to have some pathways that are less complicated for the average person, like the homestead benefits if you were to sell it and it's homesteaded. Here's another opportunity, okay, another option, which is a cash out refinance. And again, if you access the equity in the home through a cash out refinance, because it's considered debt, it's tax free. So if you pull out, if you go, great, now my home's worth a whole bunch of extra money more, I want to pull out 40, 60, 100, $200,000, you can pull that money out by refinancing. You might be getting a more favorable interest rate too. So your interest will go down, and that might make your payment go down too. And you can pull out that equity tax-free, which is awesome. So again, this is where I think I probably predominantly disagree with him by recommending to the average person to go stocks first. I just don't agree with that. I think if you don't have a house, you should buy a house first. And oftentimes you can get a house for far less. I mean, if you have 10 or 20, 30K and you're like, well, I can either put this in the stock market or I can buy a house, I would probably go buy the house because there's so much more nuance to the stock market. Which stocks should you buy? Should you trust one of these big companies and, use one of these big mutual funds or, one of these, blanketed, a bunch of different portfolio stocks that they put together for you and you really don't even know where your money's at. And then there's the whole issue of accessing that money at a later date. You don't want to just look at the money on a screen and be like, wow, my stock portfolio went from 40K to 100K. Yay. It's like, okay, well, I need some of that money, and what does that penalty look like? How much are you going to lose to access that? So those are questions you should ask yourself.
Again, it's not about you trying to get rich. It's about you not falling behind. If you can beat the real rate of inflation, that's great. But at least if you're just, on par, at least your money, your savings, it's not falling behind. For the average person, it's about getting some gold, getting some silver, getting some commodities.
Definitely.
I mean, you could do that physically. You can do that through the stock markets. So listen, I just want you to be aware of the situation. I'm just trying to keep people safe. The wealth inequality in the upcoming years is just going to get much worse due to inflation. And I'm just trying to help as many people as possible.
So great guy, great video. I do think there's some doom and gloom. I think a lot of it's genuine. I think he does absolutely want to help us and everyone as much as he can. I do think there is an actual opportunity to win big, and this is not necessarily like a doomsday, everything's over kind of scenario. I think, again, if you're playing the game a certain way, you can really win, and you can win big, and you can shelter yourself from things like hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is a scary thing. I'm not saying it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows by any means. It could actually be very bad, but it could be a lot less worse, or potentially really good, if you play the game a certain way. And that way is going to be buying assets that are going to go up with inflation. So if you're someone who is local in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or just in the state of Texas in general, and you need a little help and you're considering buying or getting into real estate, hit me up. I'll put my email link down in the description below, and I would love to talk to you and speak more and see if there's anything I can do to help you out, whether you're trying to buy or sell. And we'll go over that more in future videos as well. And I'm going to keep coming with as much good information as I can. And if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. Please like and subscribe, and I'll keep trying to roll out new videos as fast as I can, trying to bring you up-to-date information and as much valuable as possible. So again, my name is Mr. Steele. Thank you so much. Have a blessed one.